this in. Good.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm Cindy Assini. I'm the supervisor of social studies and gifted and talented here in Hillsborough. I'm also a proud resident of Hillsborough, and just really my heartfelt thanks on coming out on such a cold night. From reviewing the sign-up sheets, I know that I'm even fortunate enough to have some couples in attendance, and man, having your date night here at the Reach Information Night, that is really going above and beyond. So again, to all of you, thank you for being here. I'm here with Dr. Joan Ruddiman, who is a wealth of knowledge and resources about gifted and talented students and just life in general. She earned her doctorate from Columbia University. She spent years as a gifted specialist in West Windsor, Plainsboro, New Jersey. She is now semi-retired, I'll say, full-time grandma, part-time working with the New Jersey Association for Gifted Children, National History Day. She's an award-winning educator, and we really are fortunate to hear from her tonight. We will leave time at the end for your questions, and I am always available as a resource to you, whether your child qualifies for REACH or not, whether your child's in 2nd grade, 7th grade, or the high school. We are here as your resources to make sure that every child is challenged every day here in Hillsborough. So no further ado, I'll jump in and introduce, we do have one of our gifted specialists here at the elementary level, Maureen Donofsky, and we have the names of the others projected. So if you have questions specific to your school, that is a good person to reach out to. To set the tone for our discussion, I don't make decisions in my office just willy-nilly. There's state law to follow about gifted education, and there's also board policy. There's the district mission and goals. So our mission here in Hillsborough is to really make sure, again, that we are serving all students and helping all students develop their gifts and talents. In terms of the gifted program in particular, the board policy directs us to compare kids to each other, chronological peers, to see who needs programming in addition to the classroom instruction in order to meet their potential. So I've bolded some choice words up there because it is not a particularly pleasant part of my job to compare children to each other, but again, that's what the state law and the board policy dictates that I do. So later on, at the end of the presentation, I'll go through very briefly some information about the identification process here. And I'll say the formal identification process because every day teachers are working with children in the district, giving them assessments and figuring out how to challenge them. The REACH program is one piece of how we challenge students here in Hillsborough. In terms of children doing very well in school and children that perhaps are most in need of a gifted program, I'm going to pull on some research that basically describes two types of students. This is a list that as a parent myself I can say if this describes my child, I will be very happy. He will earn good grades and probably be very well adjusted in school. So I'll let you read it for yourself, but these are the types of students who typically progress very nicely, meet all teacher expectations, and go on to be very successful adults. And one way to conceptualize those children is that they're the shiny apples of the classroom. And again, will do very well, basically regardless of how hard we're working here as educators. I'm going to put up another list of words. Some of which, we all want to cultivate curiosity in our children, but you may have encountered either in your own child or other children really kind of extenuating ideas. Children who want to really explore non-traditional ways, and that can be challenging. Challenging as a parent because you may be wondering why it's so hard for your child to miss a goal in soccer when all the other kids on the team, it doesn't seem like a really big issue if they miss a shot. So there's a set of characteristics that Dr. Ruddiman will get into in more detail that are associated in the research with giftedness. And The challenges there mean that, if we're dealing with a child who could be the next Einstein or the next Steve Jobs, they may want to drop out of school. They may be the elementary student asking, why do we have to do this? This seems like it's not very useful. Those are the students that we want to make sure we don't miss just because they can be challenging in the classroom. That challenge that they're presenting may be because of high ability. So that's one of the things that we're trying to sort out through a universal screener that we'll implement in second grade. So the list on the right that you see is what the research would say are some of the concomitant difficulties, if you will, of being quote-unquote gifted. So a good analogy for this, if you watch Simpsons, Lisa is your bright, shiny apple, and man, parenting Lisa is a dream compared to parenting Bart. So I was fortunate enough to attend the National Association for Gifted Children conference one year when it was relatively local, and one of the mothers who spoke, mother of a very gifted young man, Jack Andraka, and he developed a test for pancreatic cancer in his basement because a family friend had pancreatic cancer, and he wanted to have an early way to detect it that basically didn't exist. Along that road, he also knocked the neighborhood power out with a Tesla coil experiment. So again, you're Bart Simpson. There are a lot of instructional implications for dealing with students that have extreme high ability, high task commitment, high creativity, and some of those are listed above. But basically, I often say to parents, if we have a kindergartner who is reading chapter books, we need to figure out how to address that. And that can magnify over the course of a child's academic career so that you can see a mismatch. If everyone else is not reading and I have someone reading chapter books, that's the type of mismatch that we're looking to serve through the REACH program. So some students will already know so many of the things that their classmates are discovering, and that's why we're bound by both law and ethics to have programming to challenge those children. Again, I've mentioned the board policy a couple of times. The programming that we've developed and we are continuing to iterate on, we've currently labeled REACH. That may change. That was something that came up in the strategic planning process. Having the same name for what is in essence different programs is kind of a historical artifact that can sometimes confuse students. Well, I had Ms. Donofsky for REACH last year. Why don't I have her for REACH this year? Well, last year it was REACH Special, and this year it's REACH Pullout. We may move forward in terms of simplifying that by having different names for different programs, just so you're aware. But basically at the K-4 level, we are fortunate enough to have elementary gifted specialists that can do enrichment support at any grade for students who, again, have really extreme needs. In grades 1 and 2, all students have a special time with the REACH teacher where they work on what we call the REACH thinking skills, creativity, flexible thinking, elaboration, imagination, on and on. And then in grades 3 and 4, the REACH teachers work with students who we've formally identified through a multiple measure standardized testing program to have students work with the REACH teacher, usually about 2 hours a week. Now, one of the things that I often say to parents, whether or not their child qualifies for REACH, is that kids are gifted 24/7, and 2 hours a week can be important for a child. But the most important thing is that we're all working together to make sure that each child is challenged every day. And we have a lot of strategies to do that. I can support that work, as can the REACH teachers, the building principal, and obviously, most importantly, the classroom teachers. In grades 5 to 12, the REACH program happens in social studies classes as a replacement class in grades 5 through 8. And then in the high school, students have choice. They can take honors classes in all the different disciplines, followed by AP classes, and there is the option to have an internship as a senior. Students don't have to qualify for REACH in any previous grades to participate in the internship, and it's a great program, but most of you have about a decade before you have to worry about that. So, your child in high school will get much more information about that process. I'm now going to give you a little bit more background on Dr. Ruddiman. She has worked with the district for a number of years. She's helped with professional development for teachers. She was part of bringing a gifted certificate program to the district. So Hillsborough has the most teachers who have gone through Rutgers program to earn not a formal teaching certificate, but a certificate that shows they've studied gifted and talented education and reached a level of proficiency in teaching gifted and talented students. So we're very proud here in Hillsborough of our efforts to develop classroom teachers and gifted specialists in the field, and Dr. Ruddiman has been a huge part of that initiative. So with no further ado, I will turn the presentation over to her so she can share with you some characteristics of gifted children.
Thank you so much, Cindy. It is delightful to be here and to watch this district really grow and evolve in your understanding and the way that gifted needs are addressed very effectively, I think, in this district. Your Hillsborough, case in point, district defines giftedness as the Department of Education in 1993 defined gifted. Children and youth with outstanding talent who perform or who have the potential for performing at remarkably high levels of accomplishment when compared to others of their age, experience, and environment. And you heard Dr. Assini reference this. Our philosophy, Mo's and Cindy's and mine, all come from a guy named Joe Rizzoli, who is a New Jersey native, by the way. He's been at the University of Connecticut for half a century. I mean, he's a remarkable man. I think he's now in his 80s and still going way strong. He developed a concept of giftedness where he doesn't talk about giftedness, he talks about gifted behavior. And he sees gifted behavior as the intersection of above average ability, creativity, and task commitment. He talks about above average ability. Joe doesn't get into IQ scores and splitting hairs over, what is extraordinarily high intelligence. What he's looking at is, what do they do with it? That creativity piece, and the ability to think beyond sometimes our good school behavior of just doing school particularly well. But the most important of these three, he considers task commitment. Now, Joe came up with this 45 years ago, and it really has defined his understanding of gifted. Task commitment is what now is called resiliency, grit, and I'm sure you've read the books. There's a wonderful woman named Angela Duckworth down at the University of Pennsylvania who has an entire department now devoted to the study of this. It's just a fascinating story. But I know that you are aware of these terms. Joe understood this a half century ago, that it really is that internal motivation, that need to do it, that is really a personal autonomy that students take. There is the idea of Schoolhouse Gifted, and these are the kids that will say how many pages should it be, and how many sentences should it be, and how many words in a sentence. They're very attuned to rules and following directions, teacher pleasing. And as Dr. Assini pointed out, these are really wonderful kids for teachers to have in the classroom and for you as parents to have at home. They generally love school. They generally love their teacher. Like, they're not going to ever balk about, I have to go to school today. They love whatever's put in front of them. They're really wonderful people. Schoolhouse Gifted. They know how to do school particularly well. Gifted students may show evidence of Schoolhouse Gifted behaviors, but they also have that internal drive, what is called being intrinsically motivated. They're not motivated by praise or grades. They're self-driven. This is that task commitment piece, that grit and resiliency that comes into it. They go beyond their expectations in the classroom. They have interests outside of the curriculum. They often want to go much deeper than the curriculum allows them to go. They'll be in a science unit and they'll, come home from school and they're really kind of down in the dumps. Well, we were doing a really interesting thing on weather, and the unit's over. We had the test and it's done. And what they wanted to do was just continue to explore everything about weather they could possibly find. And you'll find that then this weekend you're going to be going to the library and getting every book on weather that you can find, and they'll pursue it on their own. They exhibit a depth of interest and analysis that is generally unusual for their age peers. They are creative producers. They not only want to learn about stuff, but they want to do something with it. Where Schoolhouse Gifted kids are really comfortable with getting a grade, finishing a project and getting a grade and having it displayed on the kitchen refrigerator or on the wall in the classroom. The creative producers want more than that. It's got to be worth something. Knowing this, and we'll get into more about the gifted psyche, gifted education needs to involve rigorous pace, some element of student choice, and some meaningful purpose, meaning it's meaningful to them. Needs to have authentic assessment. Authentic assessment means something that is, go back to the creative producer, something that is useful in the world, something that you're sharing information with someone that actually can use the information. These are the kids that go out and want to talk to experts in the field, and they want to get ideas from them, and they want to share their ideas with the person. This is tricky to do when we're talking about curriculum in schools. When we talk about rigorous pace, we have to be careful in a classroom that the pace meets the needs of all students. When we talk about student choice, well, you have a class of 20 second graders and you're going to give everybody a choice of what they're going to do. That sounds like a recipe for chaos. So, we tend to control it. And then meaningful purpose, as hard as teachers in the classroom want to make sure that everything's authentic, sometimes you just have to get the job done. You just have to take the test, get the grade, move on. So what we have found on a very practical level, and what I think Hillsborough does very well, is that they attend to the needs of gifted kids within the school day. So as Dr. Assini pointed out, it's maybe a half an hour a week. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a change of pace. It allows students to have an opportunity to do things differently within school. We have after-school programs. As your kids get older, they're going to be taking extracurricular activities outside of school. All of that fits into this and meeting their needs. Gifted education should require research skills, critical and analytical problem-solving skills, communication skills, both communication with a mentor and with others, as well as communicating a product or an idea outwardly. Communication has two pieces to it. What I'm going to share with you, I want you to understand, comes from a wide range of experts. This is only just a small smattering, but in any of those research papers, chapter 2 is always going to be your research. So consider this chapter 2. And it's only a very, very small percentage of what we know. But characteristics of gifted says who? Well, lots of people. So we looked at Bart and Lisa. We looked at the bright, shiny apple, and we looked at Bart. There are characteristics that we have come to identify with gifted kids. There are some that are very positive, like being very alert, rapid learning, superior language ability, analytical ability, very keen observers, having high capacity for memory, thinking in abstract and complex ways, superior reasoning and problem solving, insightful, sees the big picture, high concentration and long attention spans, where they really get down deep into something. They ask a lot of questions. Intense. Intensity may be the word that best defines gifted people. They're intense. Highly motivated, and they can have strong empathy. But looking at those positive characteristics can also have a dark side. They can have uneven mental development. You can have a child that is amazingly fluid and with their language, but they're not real sharp with their numbers yet. You might have a kid that's really good with numbers and sciences, but they're not very good at reading. So that uneven kind of development. Uneven development with personal abilities, emotional abilities. I know a little 3-year-old who is very tall. He's the size of a 6-year-old. He's very verbal, and he's 3. And I was telling Cindy that often when they're out and about, this young John will act out like 3-year-olds will do, and people will look askance at, look at that child. I mean, because he looks like he's a kindergartner. And the father will say, it's just so hard being 3. And people say, he's 3? Yeah, he's just a baby, really, and he's just 3. So this idea of being very sophisticated in their thinking, being really astute with their problem solving, and not being very emotionally strong. Being nonconformist, not wanting to go along with the crowd. Perfectionism, it's capitalized for a reason. This is a real bane of the existence of gifted people, is that they are perfectionists. And they're not just perfectionists for themselves. They'll hold parents and teachers to task as well. Most teachers don't like being told off by a 7-year-old, so it can create problems. The self-criticism goes along with that, and that leads to self-doubt and extreme feelings of being different, often highly opinionated. So you can see that there's wonderful aspects of this, but there's a dark side to it as well. So what I'm going to do now for you is called, by my millennial friends, a word wall. So on word walls, the big ideas are writ large, and the lesser ideas are smaller. So under cognition, these are some characteristics that we generally see. Absolutely, we'll see with gifted kids original ideas, creativity, connecting seemingly unrelated ideas. And that seems to be a given. Sometimes they have superior abilities to reason or generalize or problem solve. Sometimes they have vivid and rich imaginations. But I know a really smart little 4-year-old, and she got sick one day, and her mama said, gee, Mallory, what did you eat? And she said, I don't know, but I licked a toad, because she's a scientist. And, that's one way that she discovers the world, by licking things. So her pop-up said to her the next day, Mallory, I heard you kissed a toad. Did he turn into a prince? Oh, Pop-Pop, it's a toad. It's not a prince. This is the little one that will say, when she's swimming around in the pool, oh, you look just like a mermaid. I'm not a mermaid. I am a girl. Vivid and rich imagination, not on the princess level, but, in the scientific kind of level. Extensive vocabulary, maybe. Einstein didn't speak until he was at 4, right? Sometimes they learn things rapidly, sometimes they have long-term memory, sometimes there's mathematical ability, sometimes there's avid reading. These are all elements of cognition that you will see in gifted people, but you won't see all of these all of the time. What you are going to see is those original and creative ideas. Abstract thinking, mind running on multiple tracks, thinking fast. Perception and emotion. It's just one of the ways it sets gifted kids apart is because they tend to be described as quirky. In unkind ways, they can be described as difficult. They just are what they are. Highly sensitive. They can be sensitive to tactile things like tags on their clothes or wearing blue jeans. They don't like blue jeans, that type of thing. There's a guy named Dabrowski that has done a lot of research into this. And that is somewhat, but not Always. Are they sensitive to other people's feelings? Yes. Are they sensitive to what's going on around them? Yes. Mom and dad try to have a private conversation. You think you've done a really good job with, keeping everything on a nice light level, but your gifted kid will feel the undercurrents and will ask you about it. This is something that strikes people as being unexpected. Gifted people have high senses of humor. They have a high sense of what they think is funny. Other people might not think it's funny. There is the rub. So they have a great sense of humor, but often it will go over other people's heads. Perceptive, observation, that's kind of key. Passionate and intense, there's that intense word again. Sensitive to small changes in environment, can be introverted, aware of things that others are not. Sometimes that's part of it. Sometimes tolerance to ambiguity and complexity, may see many sides of things. A lot of that's nurture, I think, in how we guide these people to be empathetic. I don't know if you watch The Big Bang Theory. This has been my go-to for years. Whoever writes that is gifted or has someone in there that they know intimately who is gifted, because they get it. There are 4 people that are involved, and they all are on different levels of giftedness. So you have the super MIT engineer guy who does magic, and kind of quirky. And you've got the physics guys, and one physics guy is brighter than all of them. I mean, in Sheldon. What is fascinating to me is how he has grown from the first time that we've seen him over a series of, I don't know, it's been on 8 years or something, where he has learned to recognize sarcasm. He has learned to tell jokes that other people actually can laugh at. He has learned to be empathetic. Sometimes he has to be reminded of it often, but he now understands the importance of it. So this idea of perception and emotion is something that is interesting. And the childlike sense of wonder that just came up, that's really cool. And we'll see that in younger children. And I sure hate to think that kids come to school and they're exclamation points. And by the time they leave school, they're periods. That sense of wonder, that sense of joy in learning that we want to continue to foster at home and at school. And openness to experience is part of it. Can they be emotionally stable and serene? And the answer is absolutely yes. And that's the environment that we within the school create, and that's the atmosphere at home that's created. And these kids can be incredibly serene and emotionally stable. What motivates these people? What are their values? Well, they're perfectionists. They want the world to be the way the world should be. An ongoing story on the Big Bang Theory, and you scientists will appreciate this one. By the way, they have physicists that cross-check everything that they put up on the board, and all the language that they're doing. So if you're a physicist and you're watching this, you're like, hey, they got that right. How did they do that? They got experts working with them. As a physicist, Sheldon has been trying to come up with a theory of the world and how, the world construct. And in this season, what he has come up with, and with his new wife Amy, is an asymmetrical vision of the world's development, of the universe, asymmetrical, as in being a little off kilter. And he says at one point, I wanted everything to be perfect. Well, yeah, because that's what they are, they're perfectionists. Curious and a desire to know, very independent and autonomous. This is the thing that is real hard in school and really hard for you parents at home. These kids are not rewarded by praise. They're not rewarded by grades. And you're like, you got to do this or, you're not going to get a good grade. I don't care. Come on, So it has to have some intrinsic meaning to them, has to be something important to them. They're looking for patterns in life. Sheldon is looking for the patterns of the universe, meaning in life. They like challenges. They like risk-taking. I taught middle school kids for a really long time. and high school kids. And from what I know now about brain research and what's going on with brain development, preteens and teenagers have a predilection for taking risks. There's actually chemicals in the brain that are kind of driving them to this. And my objective was to provide enough stimulation and challenges in our classroom and what we did that would be risky, that would satisfy that in their brains so that they didn't do things that were really risky, like messing around with smoking and alcohol and drugs and shoplifting and whatever. Outrage at injustice and moral breaches, you don't want them watching TV and the news. You just try to divert them from other things. That sense of justice in the world is not always a just place. They have a lot of interests and sometimes are overwhelmed by their interests. Strong moral convictions, integrity, honesty, that there's a right and a wrong, and that goes back to that perfectionist thing. High drive, we can see that often. Sometimes visionaries where they have a real sense of destiny and where they are going in the world. They love ideas, ardent about that, can be sincere, often accepting of others. Again, how we frame it and helping them to guide them to that empathy and awareness of others. Activity, physical activity and also brain activity. Energy is the key word. Kids that are really hard to put to bed at night, you put them to bed and you're with them putting them to bed until they're like 4, right? Until they can essentially read themselves to sleep because they just aren't ready to go to sleep. They're physically tired, but their brains don't turn off. As they get older, bedtime is 9:30, and they're in bed at 9:30. And you go by the room at 11 o'clock, and a light's still on, or the flashlight's under the covers, and what are you doing? I'm just reading, because they're just full of energy. And it can be kinetic energy. It can be physical energy as well. This is always a surprise when I talk to teachers, and this one shocks them, that there's a long attention span and sustained concentration, because they see that energy in the classroom and that intellectual jumping from one thing to another. And they're like, it's like a gnat. It just goes from one thing to another. He doesn't never concentrates, never settles. You at home, however, see this personality. You see the one that you call them for lunch at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or, it's time for a break. I'll be right down. Half an hour later. I'll be right down. I'm almost done. And an hour and a half later, they'll wander out of their room and had finished whatever they've been working on. School is not really conducive to that kind of activity. We run on a bell system. We run on changing classes. We get to the end of the unit and we're into the next unit. So school can be frustrating for these people because all they want to do is just really dig down into something interesting. They just want to keep studying weather. And they'll do it at home. And this is one way that school and home can work together in a really good partnership for these kids. Because if a teacher finds something in the classroom that the kid loves, and you know it as a parent, then you can do the trips to the museum. You can do the trips to the library to get books. You can provide the science station in the home, whatever. They can't stop thinking, and they work themselves off into exhaustion, and you see that. Needs periods of contemplation and solitude. Even the extroverted kids need time by themselves, just thinking time, just dreaming time. Again, this is a tough thing in school, and often your kids will come home and they'll be physically and mentally exhausted. Well, they've been playing the school game all day. They've been talking with people, they've been playing with people, they've been busy, they've been answering teachers' questions. They're doing everything school wants them to do. And what they need is just some quiet. So they come home and they go in their room and they flop down. And again, this is middle schoolish thing. Your second graders still have the energy when they come in. But understand that separation is not against you or their family or they hate their brother. No, it's just that they need some quiet time. can be spontaneous. Social relations. We worry about these people sometimes having friends. The biggest one at home and at school and at church school is the questioning authority. I have a daughter-in-law who's incredibly smart. She's a doctor, geriatrics, doesn't necessarily want to make money. She just wants to take care of old people. She's quite amazing. Kate's probably one of the smartest women I've ever met. She got tossed from CCD, which is the catechism classes for Catholic kids. She's like 6 years old. Asked inappropriate questions like, why? Happened just recently. She was in some kind of training session, and someone said, oh no, it was jury duty. She was on jury duty. And one of the lawyers said something, and Kate said, that's just totally illogical. And they said, you're out of here. So how to get kicked off a jury real fast. You're excused. Just question them. But she said, I was so embarrassed, but it just came out. Well, that's a classic gifted person, just questioning conformity. They often feel out of step and different because they are, but they don't have to be alienated or lonely. And that's how what work that is done in the classroom and in the district is important, and work that's done at home. It's often said that gifted kids don't need a lot of friends, but they need one good friend. And help to nurture that. They find the kid at the park or the gym or paint class or in music class, that there's just kind of that rapport. Encourage that, You don't have to have a lot of people, but need that person. They can be very compassionate and empathetic. And feel what others are feeling and understand it. So characteristics. So we've gone through physical activity and cognition and social development and motivation. So interestingly, and I didn't put this together, this comes from Roger Taylor, who himself is a highly gifted and quirky character. But years ago, he did an analysis of what screens kids out of gifted programs. I will tell you, this does not happen in Hillsborough. But I'm showing it to you because I want you to be aware that you're in a good place, okay? All the things that we just saw can be manifested by things like bored with routine tasks or refusing to do routine homework, difficult to move on to another subject, self-critical, impatient, critical of others, critical of the teacher, asking inappropriate questions, making inappropriate jokes or puns. I just think it's funny. They don't know it's inappropriate. Being emotionally sensitive, overreacting, getting angry easily, crying if things don't go right, perfectionism thing. Very interested in details, wanting to get into not wanting to get messy. That's a real phobia for a lot of gifted people. They don't eat fruit because fruit often is like sticky and, bananas. Don't ask a gifted kid to eat bananas. Refuses to accept authority and nonconforming, stubborn, tends to dominate others. That's what we just saw. That's what we saw, that experts all over the world in analyzing characteristics of gifted came up with some key ideas and understandings. And yet, they're the same characteristics that Roger Taylor in his studies found often screen kids out of gifted programs. They're not often the straight A student. They're not the good teacher pleaser, So, what do we want for our kids, for all kids? And this is competencies for 21st century skills. We want kids to be self-directed learners, not just being told what to do, but understanding that they can take some responsibility and empowerment. We want them to be informationally literate. We want them to understand that everything they see on the news or read on the internet is not absolutely true, that they learn to cross-check information to make sure that things are validated, that they're effective communicators within their groups and communicating outward, being collaborative as a team member, very important in today's world, practical problem solver, and all of this helps them to be a globally aware citizen. I want you to understand that these competencies did not come from the Department of Education. They did not come from educators. They came from your world, the business world. Probably going back now, I don't know, 10 years or more. Two people that were in the world of business met at a conference, and over coffee they were talking about what a problem they were having finding qualified candidates to hire. And they were talking about kids coming out of Big Ten universities and Ivy League. And these are the problems. They show up and they're perfectly dressed and they communicate beautifully and they're very pleasant, but they wait to be told what to do. And then they wait to be told how to do it. And then they go off and do it. And then they come back and they wait for the praise. When I heard this described by these two business people, I went, oh my gosh, they're talking about school. Teachers tell them what to do, we tell them how to do it, they go off and do it, they come back and we give them praise. Like, ay, ay, ay. So 10 years ago, right? So the world is changing and educators are changing as well. And this has been a huge factor in changing the way education is conducted. We understand that we have to release some authority, autonomy to student learners, that they need to be able to make some choices, they need to be able to do things that is meaningful for them, that they are using research materials appropriately and a wide variety of research materials, and that they do learn how to collaborate and work with others effectively. And you know in the business world how key that is. So Hillsborough's programs and objective of REACH, I am so proud of this, that Hillsborough has come up with this. This is exactly what they're working towards. They want to develop opportunities for kids to have complex, abstract, and higher level cognitive processes and apply them. They want to have kids in situations where they can be problem solvers and decision makers. You can't be a decision maker when somebody is always making the decision for you. Parents, heads up. Got to give your kids some chances to make their own decisions. Kate, my wonderful daughter-in-law who works with older people, she believes passionately that older people have the right to make their own decisions. She says sometimes they make really bad decisions, but that's their right to do. We need to think about our kids that way. You know, unless it's really going to hurt them. Does it matter if they wear the red sweater with the purple pants or the purple sweater with the purple pants? You know, pick your battles. But give them some ability to make some decisions. Developing awareness and acceptance of oneself as unique and as a unique member and as an active member of society. That's the global citizenship piece. To increase independence, individuality, and self-direction in learning. These are really powerful goals and objectives for a school district to be articulating, and they play in really well in parallel with what you as parents, I know, want for your kids. So the REACH program works on meeting the needs and interests and abilities of all kids, providing instruction at different rates. Remember that PACE piece? Looking at things at a different depth. There are some students that I've got it, I understand it, I'm ready to move on. There are other students, I don't quite get it yet, okay, so we're going to do some reteaching and recursive work. There are some students that, you know, I get it, but I want to do more of this. So allowing those different depths and which emphasizes the intellectual integrity of students and allows them to be curious and take those intellectual risks. Extending their ability to utilize higher level cognitive processes to synthesize complex and abstract ideas. That doesn't mean they're always going to get it right, but then they can analyze where they went wrong. You talk to anyone in the field of science, really anyone in any field, and they will tell you they learn best from their mistakes. And wasn't it Edison who said, well, did it wrong 99 times, and those are 99 times I didn't have to do it that way again. I move on. Developing student independence by encouraging initiation, creativity, and evaluation in the learning process. That it's not a means, it's not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. That learning is a process. So it's not like a straight path but it's like all kinds of little detours along the way. As we explore ideas, we try things out. Well, that didn't work, dead end. Get back on track, try some other things. Elements of risk-taking, problem-solving, being creative, all that's being important. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Assini. She's going to explain the COGAT test, and then I'm going to jump back in a moment to help answer questions and explain some more.
So where do we go from here? I hope you remember what I said at the beginning, that hopefully where we go from here is to work as partners as needed to make sure that your child is challenged every day. As far as best practices in the field, to try to have our gifted and talented programming represent the diverse students in Hillsborough, one of the best ways to do that is to do what's called a universal screening test. That means everyone in the grade takes the same test, and then we can compare students across the whole grade. When I report back the test scores, you'll see two things. One, you'll see how your child or children compare across the nation. So that's called the national percentile rank. It takes all kids who took the test nationwide. Not every child nationwide takes the test, but thousands and thousands do. And says, across the nation, your child is doing better than 25% of students, or better than 75%, or better than 95%. So the particular universal screener that we use is called the Cognitive Abilities Test. And basically, the students will take it in their class. If they have an individualized education plan, they may take it in a small group as provided in that plan. The directions are read aloud, and the test is pictures. So if your child isn't reading fluently yet, that's not going to prohibit them from doing well on the test. There are 3 sections to the test: a verbal section, a quantitative section, and a nonverbal section. So nonverbal refers to visual spatial ability. And, can a child picture something in their head and think about a pattern, for example, in their head? So as far as preparing a child to take the test, we really just encourage regular routine, bedtime, breakfast, and telling kids just to try their best to approach the test like it's a puzzle that they're trying to figure out, and not to stress about it. So we encourage parents not to do test prep books or practice problems that they might find online, A, because I've looked at many of them and they're not very good, and B, because we don't want to heighten anxiety around the test. We have many studies that show heightened anxiety leads to decreased cognitive function. In short, if your kid's too stressed, they're not going to be able to do their best. So again, encourage you to keep a regular routine, and you don't need to necessarily contact your child's teacher, but you might want to ask, hey, are your headphones still working? Do you have headphones that you're using in class? Because they will use headphones to listen to sections of the test so that they can do it each at their own pace. We're shooting for the week of February 4th, as I mentioned, the letter that went home about this evening, and hopefully you'll receive the results in March, if not by early April. So that's the general timeline. As far as the whole formal identification process, the COGAT is the first step. We do compare students locally. So like I mentioned, you'll get 2 scores, and I only explained the first one. You'll get the national percentile rank, but you'll also get what's called a local percentile rank that takes all the students in Hillsborough and basically forces them onto a curve that compares, like the board policy requires us to do. So sometimes parents will call me saying, I'm not sure why you're not doing further screening with my child. They earned a 90 percentile rank in the country on this test. They did so well. Well, yes, but one of the benefits of living in Hillsborough is that we are one of the top districts and the top states in the nation in terms of education. That means we have a lot of students who do really well here. So your child might earn a 90th percentile on the COGAT, and that only puts them in like the top quarter of Hillsborough. So you'll get to see that information on the test as well. The second round, if you will, of reach screening for formal identification is a creativity assessment and an achievement test. Again, you'll receive national scores for both of those tests. We also ask for informal parent feedback, but please don't stress about that. That's just to get a sense of things you're observing. And we take that into consideration both in the classroom, and we are developing some flexible programming based on student interest in schools where kids might have the opportunity to opt into an option or work in small groups if they're really showing extreme ability in a certain area, like for example on a common assessment in math. So we're developing more programming than just the formally identified pull-out program, and that's in the pilot stage. So more information, again, once we look at all the data of how that's working right now, more information about that will be forthcoming. But I mention it because I really am committed to helping classroom teachers, helping you, and making sure that we're meeting the needs of the students the best that we possibly can through a variety of options, because our students have a variety of needs. I also wanted to take a moment, again, in the interest of harping on this theme of partnership, to offer some quick suggestions. I couldn't imagine that there are many people in this room who aren't connected to the Hillsborough Library, but it is such a great resource, and they're constantly offering programs for different kids. And if you call up, they'll even tell you when the registration date happens, because now that I'm a parent in town, I know that it's not as easy as dropping in on story time. Often you have to register your kid like 3 months in advance on the day that the registration opens up if you actually want to do a library program. But they all are also offering some drop-in programs. So definitely, if you're not signed up for the library's email list to hear about their events, take a look for that. And if you've missed the window for the next session, take a look specifically for the drop-in programs. There is the National Association for Gifted Children and the New Jersey Association for Gifted Children. They run a variety of events, and it's a great place to connect with parents who are interested in enriching their child's learning outside of school. Dr. Ruddiman runs some programs for them, and there's a conference every March where you can go to talks and your child can go to activities. So there's no qualifications for joining. They're just looking for, again, people who have that task commitment. So if you're interested in taking your kid on a Saturday, they'll have you. So it's a great set of resources. They also have a newsletter that will let you know about different museum exhibits in the area, different opportunities for summer programs, and just general ideas of fun things to do with your kids. On the subject of fun things to do with your kids, if you haven't seen PBS's Adventures Learning, they have a great website targeted to parents where you can sit with your kid, look at all the different subject areas, and then you can click on, let's say, history, because I'm a social studies supervisor too. You can click on history and you can get a whole list of ideas of fun things that you can do as a family about history. I mean, in all your spare time, because being a parent, I know you have a ton of that when you're not doing laundry or cooking to feed your child. If you do have the inclination, it's just a great resource, so I did want to share that. And I also wanted to note, I encourage you to see what interests your child. I had a friend the other day who said, I planned this great activity to do with my nephews, and I got all these arts and crafts supplies, and then they didn't even want to do it. And so by involving your child in picking what they're interested in, that's really where the magic happens. So again, as our goal, we are looking to meet the needs of kids, and we do a variety of assessments. They're not perfect, and every day the teachers are learning about your child. So if you get the assessment results and you're thinking, this doesn't really fit what I know about my child, please do talk to their classroom teacher, because that teacher is working with your child every day and is a great resource to maybe some interests that you might not be aware of, or some ideas of how you can help with learning at home. So we are developing lots of different programs. We have the programming that's already in place, and all of it is designed to try to meet the needs of each child. So I have my contact information up here that I'll leave up during the question and answers, but you can always find me on the website, and I would look forward to hearing from any of you to talk about how we can best help you and your child. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to you. We took the question mic to use for ourselves since the other mic was having some issues. So just make sure you project your question, and then I'll repeat it so that hopefully everyone in the room and those who might be eventually watching by video can hear the question.
So for the test, there is a verbal session, right? So I'm just wondering, the format will be in words or will be in pictures?
So the question was about the format of the COGAT testing, and it is all with pictures at the second grade level. So even the verbal section that's trying to understand how students think about words is still all in pictures.
I'm sure you're closer to the week, but you have an exact date of when the testing will take place. But right now you're just
So it takes place over 3 days, and ideally it will start on Tuesday. We usually don't start on Monday because of the Super Bowl on Sunday. So although we may look at the weather forecast, because if there's also a blizzard planned that week, Super Bowl, day after, blizzard, who knows. If there is, extenuating weather circumstances, it may go into the next week. If there is a delayed opening or early closing, there will not be COGAT testing that day, most likely. Maybe in the event of an early closing, but most likely not. So again, it may depend on a couple factors, but most likely it will start the Tuesday of that week and go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
So it's 3 days.
It's 3 days because there's 3 sections and we do a section a day. You could do them all at once, but we think it's better with the little ones, since this is the first standardized test that they're really taking, to just make it very low key. It takes about a half hour a day, and that's how we've done it in the past.
This is a very basic question, but what's the difference between reach and COGAT altogether?
Okay, so the question was about the difference between some of the different words that we've been using tonight. So REACH is the name of the Gifted and Talented program here. It stands for Reach and Explore Creative Heights, which aligns to the definition that Dr. Ruddiman talked about gifted education. The COGAT, the Cognitive Abilities Test, is the screening tool that we use initially to see who we give further tests to. So there's 2 steps. There's to be formally identified for the REACH program. There's the COGAT test, and then there are 2 other tests as well. But we don't give the 2 other tests to every student because of the time involved and just challenge of organizing that.
I wanted just to say, I just wanted to say something on testing. There's a lot of different kinds of testing. COGAT, a test of cognitive abilities, literally, how do kids think, right? There's no way to prepare for this when they get into middle school and high school and they take PARCC, and those are assessment tests. Those are what do you know, content-based tests. Like, do you know this kind of history or this kind of science or whatever? So think about the COGAT as a baseline. It's kind of the first snapshot of how kids think and what they need. So it's finding kids that may need more. It's finding kids that may need remediation in some way. It's finding kids and how they fit into the whole big picture. And it really is something that you should embrace and feel good about, because it just is a baseline understanding. It also does not indicate where the kid is going to be in 10 years or going to college, because honestly, I'm not sure that Einstein would have done well on the COGAT. So just bear that in mind.
I was just curious how the teachers are presenting the tests to the kids, like how they're introducing to them and what they're sort of doing. My daughter has anxiety instant test, so I'm just curious how they're presenting.
So the question was about how teachers are presenting the test to students. I have sat with all the second grade teachers last year, and this year we'll provide training again about how to implement the test, and I give them the same advice that I gave all of you, which is exactly in quotes to tell students this is an activity that will help us understand how you think. We encourage them to present it to students as a puzzle, and there is a lot of research about what we say before testing and how it can impact students, so we are aware of that, and we do coach the teachers to have as relaxed of an atmosphere as possible, and to also focus on, we don't walk around saying, this is the REACH test. And in reality, it's not just the REACH test. It is the first standardized test that students are taking, so it's just a helpful baseline. It also helps us understand the different abilities that students might have. So there's those 3 sections, and they correspond to 3 different abilities. Roughly their verbal ability, how they think about words, their quantitative ability, how they think about numbers, and their nonverbal ability, which is how they think about visual spatial. So there may be differences in how your child performs on the different sections. So definitely look at those sections, and you can go on the website of the company that offers the COGAT to find out more information about the different sections and strategies that you can use. Like, let's say your child is really verbal but not really quantitative. How can you leverage their verbal ability to help them grow in their quantitative ability? And that's part of what the COGAT offers, and part of why we use it as a district is because it does give us some of those strategies to work with students. So the COGAT is definitely more than just about reach. It's before they take any of the other standardized tests like PARCC to get a general idea of how they're doing in terms of their thinking.
Is there an element of paper testing at all, or is it just computer-based with headphones?
So the question was whether there's an element of paper testing. The creativity assessment is pencil and paper. The other 2 are on the computer, similar to how they will take the PARCC assessment as 3rd graders.
If they go past the COGAT, the other 2 assessments, what's the timeline for that?
The question was the timeline for the other assessments. I can't give a specific because I often have to hunt down parents to get their permission to test their child. So the goal would be to finish all the testing by spring break at the latest, but more ideally towards the beginning of April. So most likely the testing is going to take place mid-March. But again, I will report out the scores to all the families sometime in March, hopefully more toward the beginning. But again, we also try to get every single 2nd grader. Sometimes that's just impossible because someone may be out of school for a month. But we do try to get every 2nd grader, and that takes some time. And then we notify parents of the scores. We ask for permission to screen with the other 2 assessments. We don't ask for permission for the COGAT because every student takes it. But for the other 2, because it's selected students and they'll be pulled out of class to take it, we ask your permission. Once we get all the permission, then we set the rosters and organize the schedule with teachers. And so the building reach teacher works with the classroom teacher. So they're not doing reach testing on the day they were supposed to have a special classroom event and they have to miss it. So we're conscious of those things too.
So those are more like individualized screenings, or are those in groups as well?
So the question was whether the 2nd round of testing is individualized or groups. It's, again, in small groups.
So given that it's a high-performing school district, what percent of the kids wind up in the REACH program? First.
So the question was, given that it's a high-performing district, what percentage of students ends up in the REACH program? And that varies year by year and school by school. So we're looking for students who, when compared to their peers, seem to have exceptional needs. That tends to be students who, in terms of national scores, are in the 95th percentile or above. But we definitely look at the scores year by year, and we can only have 100 students in the REACH program. We only have enough teacher slots for 15 students per school. It's nothing like that. The number of students in a grade per school this year, I think, ranges from 6 students in one grade at one school to like 21 in another school, because we use district-wide criteria. So, and there may be double the number of students in REACH in 4th grade compared to 3rd grade, or vice versa. It depends on the group of students each year and how they compare across the district. The same goes, by the way, for all the other programs that we have in Hillsborough. There's no program from advanced math and literacy to honors classes at the high school where we have had to ever say, sorry, your child cannot have this academic experience that we think that they need because we don't have the staffing. We make the staffing work, and thankfully the Board of Education has provided a budget where we're able to do that.
So you just mentioned something about 4th grade, so the number of students each year would differ at each year with retest, or you just...
So the question was, from year to year, there might be different students in REACH. So if a student qualifies, they will stay in the REACH program. At this point, when I send out the permission slips, I do ask if they could participate this year because the program, again, may change and evolve. But as of right now, once they qualify for the program, they'll remain in the program unless there's some extenuating circumstances. And what generally happens is that the program will grow because every year teachers have the opportunity to nominate a child for screening in the spring. So in second grade, the program is all funneled through the universal screener, and then the other two tests, it's very structured. And then in third grade, fourth grade, and on, the teachers have the opportunity to nominate students based on their classroom performance for screening, at which point they would take those 3 tests and qualify depending on whether they compare with their scores to students who are already in the program.
So this test is all paper-based, or the test is all paper-based, the COGAT? Is it computer-based or paper-based?
Yeah.
All the 3 sections?
Yes, so the question was about whether the COGAT is computer-based, and yes, it is computer-based.
How many questions each section?
The question was how many questions are in each section of the COGAT, and the answer is I don't know. But I will tell you that I have been in second grade classrooms when it is going on. It's not timed, so you don't have to worry about children finishing soon enough, or any strategies like make sure you answer a question a minute, because if you don't answer a question a minute, you're going to run out of time. It's not anything like that. So hopefully knowing that puts your mind at ease, and I'm imagining that's where you were going with the question of how many questions are there. So again, if you want me to follow up with you, I'd be happy to talk with you afterwards if you contact me. But the most important thing to know is it's not like some of the tests that we've been used to taking as older students where you really have to manage your time. It's designed for little kids. It's pictures. They can go as slow as they want. They can hear the directions again. It will be very appropriate for them.
And the kids will know this, right? Because a lot of them are afraid to ask questions, and a lot of them don't know that they can hear it again. And so they're used to that structure, so this is going to be something new.
So the question was, what are the kids going to know about the test? So how most of the second grade teams have handled it is that they go through the training with me, and they did implement the computer-based testing last year. So once they go through the training, they take a day at Circle to show the students on their own device, like this is what it looks like. And there's an introductory session. So before the day of testing, they'll do the introductory session with students, so the students can practice pressing the little stop button, pressing the little play button, going back and forth. They can practice on the drawing screen, which they all love. And so they get a sense of how it works, even before the testing starts.
Another question in terms of timeless after the second round of testing, when you find the
So the question was, when do I typically notify parents of the final placements? My goal is always before the end of the year. I can't say it's always happened, but once we get the data from the first test, I meet with the teachers and we look at it and we say, what are we surprised by? What makes sense? Then we do the same with the second round of the data. So all of that takes some time, and I do also create a personalized letter to each, or email, I should say, to each family so that it puts the scores into context. That also takes some time, so typically by the end of the school year. Looks like that's it for questions. So again, please feel free to contact me. Let me know if there's anything that I can do to help you on this journey as partners in your child's education. Thank you.
Thank you.